Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I'm Dan Scogan, your host for the Ag Innovation News Podcast. Guests on this podcast will shed light on innovations in value-added agriculture, highlight important voices and work that's being done throughout the Minnesota ag sector, and educate the public about resources and organizations that support Minnesota agriculture. On today's podcast, we'll be visiting with Jon Veldhouse. Jon is the CEO of Qore, a joint venture of Cargill and HELM Ag. Jon also serves as a director on the AURI Board of Directors. So we're going to talk to him about both of those things a little bit today. Jon, welcome to the podcast, and let's start with some background on you. Tell us a little more about yourself and your journey to becoming the CEO at Qore.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Nice to be on today. A little bit about me. So it's kind of been a 25 plus year journey in agriculture, but even going back, I'll start with born and raised in Minnesota, west central Minnesota on a family farm. A lot of my extended family and my wife's extended family actually farm yet, but my story was written a little bit different. So I decided to go study science. So I have a degree in biotechnology from St. Cloud State University. And then shortly after that in the 2000s until today, have been pursuing a career to really find opportunities to add value to agriculture. And the first half of my career was spent in Cargill and in other Cargill businesses, I would say, doing more science and technology development. And then kind of the mid 2010s, I decided to get more involved on the business side of things. And so last 7-8 years have really been focused on developing what's known as the joint venture Qore that you referred to, is building up and launching this new venture. And so coming from Cargill, part of my job was to help set up the structure of the business and then identify the technology for the business. And we launched this venture in 2021.
So you're the CEO. Tell me more about Qore. What does this venture include?
Qore is really focused on bringing more sustainable or value-added materials to the market, and we're really bringing differentiated materials to petroleum to market. Our first product, QIRA, is taking what starts as corn and taking the corn sugar, converting that into a chemical called 1,4-butanediol. And so 1,4-butanediol is a kind of a ubiquitous chemical that has been made from petroleum for several decades. And we're bringing it to market with a little bit different value proposition. We're making it from corn. So instead of the raw material being coal or natural gas or oil, it's going to come from corn, which of course is really CO2, right? And so instead of taking that carbon out of the ground, we're taking it out of the air with the help of farmers and agriculture and turning it into that chemical.
I was just going to say, you're sounding like you're working on something that's sustainable. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it's more sustainable chemistry. And so the chemical itself goes into several everyday products. And so the most notable would be spandex. And so into textile materials. So clothing is one of our largest target markets. And we have a good collaboration with the Lycra company, which some of the listeners may be familiar with, but it's really the stretch in fabric. And so the denim we wear, the undergarments we wear, the yoga pants and athleisure wear, all of that stretch and little bit of forgiveness, that is all made with primarily this starting product in QIRA. Some other examples are airbags in your shoes. So, well, that's the technical term for them. Other people know them as Nike air bubbles, but that is another example of a material that's made from this chemical. You can find it in the durable plastic. So if you open the hood of your car and it's full of that black plastic, that's another polymer that's made with this chemical. And then the last I'll mention is more sustainable packaging. So for some of us actually I live in Hennepin County, but there's an organics recycling that's starting to catch on in the metro area. And those green plastic bags that you use for organics recycling, those are biodegradable. And that's another example of where this chemical plays a role. So it's a pretty ubiquitous and large market that's established out there, and we're just trying to break in with a little bit of a differentiated approach.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about that, John, but if I'm tracking it right, or for our listeners' benefit, Qore then is the venture that was created with Cargill and HELM, and QIRA then is the product that is being created or sold. Is that right?
Yes, and I do this too much day in and day out, so I may have to slow down and separate those two things out. My apologies. So, yeah, Core is the venture, and it owned, like you said, Cargill, which many of the listeners know, and then Helm AG, which is a German chemicals distribution company based in Hamburg, Germany. And then QIRA is the product. That's the brand name for the 1,4-butanediol that's derived from corn sugar.
And so you've been involved with Qore from the beginning. So you've taken this from we're doing nothing to we're doing all of those things that you just listed off.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a career journey. Now we're in 2025, so probably the last 8 years of my career. So a big chunk of my career has been starting from nothing and launching this new product and building a business around it.
And it's actually gone quite fast. When I hear you talk about all the different products that you're involved with, it sounds like it's grown rather quickly.
In the early days, of course, you have a lot of paperwork and a lot of working through details of investment and attracting the capital that you need to build a business like this. I should mention, right, the first facility that we constructed to make this product was a over $350 million investment from the parent companies. And so that has been about the last three to 4 years has been building that asset. So early, it was really about developing the business thesis and getting the customers and the ecosystem put together, and then raising and deploying that capital through Cargill and HELM.
Is there a plant located someplace in Minnesota?
Unfortunately, it's not in Minnesota. So the headquarters aren't in Minnesota, but the first operating facility is located in southeast Iowa. And so it's co-located with a existing Cargill biorefining campus. And so the corn wet milling facilities that are dotted across the Midwest, we decided to locate the first facility in Iowa.
And then, when we talk about value added, do you chart or track at all what you might do to corn prices as you use this process? Are local farmers getting more for their corn than they might otherwise, or what's the value add?
Long-term vision would definitely be to add value and have a significant impact on the commodity. The local impact is really working with the local farmers. They have existing relationships with Cargill for that merchandising their corn at that facility. But we also are working very closely with the farmers and connecting the entire value chain so that a brand owner can, like a Lululemon, for example, that makes yoga pants or stretch athleisure wear, and several others, right? The brands and retailers, but they have an opportunity to come out and learn about agriculture and specifically about corn and the impact to the local economy and all of the long-term impacts through sequestering that carbon. And it starts with not only the plant just using the CO2, but then what's the future look like in more sustainable and more regenerative farming practices. Those stories have to be heard and understood, because if you take yourself out of agriculture and drop yourself into just a coastal community, I would say, is they don't understand that a lot of these regenerative quote unquote practices are already in use, right? And so it gives us an opportunity to highlight them with the local farmers, and then also hopefully drive continued value added agriculture for corn in general, but definitely on the local basis as well.
Well, it certainly is interesting to me that we could shop for a more sustainable product. So, who are your customers? And you've kind of listed off a few of them. And what are they working on? And then, as a consumer, can I see on the label that Qore is involved or that QIRA is being used? Or is there a way for me to identify a product? Or can I just assume that they're all going sustainable?
Great question. So, first, I would say is we're just in the process of starting our manufacturing facility. So, it was about almost nearly 4 years to construct that $350 million asset. As we start to ship product this spring and summer, that will then go to our customers to be converted into products. And then we can just use the textile or apparel value chain as an example. As I said, we have a public announced partnership with a Lycra company, and was just say we're working with several brands and retailers. So think of those in athleisure, such as the Lululemons, such as the Vioris, or even the Nikes and New Balance and Under Armour, and retailers such as Target or Walmart. There are several within that value chain. Of course, these aren't all public, but that gives you an example of the people that could participate, and several will participate. And so, as we ship our product from the facility in Iowa, it will then go to the Lycra company. The Lycra company will make the spandex or elastane material out of that, and then work with their partners, such as a Lululemon or whomever, to turn that into a garment that will find its way into stores. And so the process of doing all of that takes actually quite a bit of time. And so it'll probably be more like a year from now before you start to see those coming onto store shelves. 9 months to a year, I would say.
I'm going to look forward to it.
And the hope is that it's very clear that this is derived from corn, and consumers will have that choice. And they'll really have the opportunity to learn more about the Midwest farmer, and how it can contribute to a more sustainable future.
John, when I introduced you, I also introduced you as a board member at AURI, and I want to talk a little bit more about that, your role and the board's role on running this organization. But I want to remind our listeners today that you're listening to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. And today we're visiting with Jon Veldhouse. Jon is the CEO of Qore, a joint venture of Cargill and HELM AG. Jon also serves as a director on the AURI board of directors. And Jon, I want to turn that page and talk a little bit about AURI and your role there. You do serve on the board of directors. How did that come to be?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. And actually, a previous director had me in mind when she finished up her term. She said, "Hey, have you ever heard of the Egg Utilization Research Institute?" And had never really heard of it. And so I had the opportunity to meet with her as being a previous director, as well as at the time the executive director was Shannon, and still is Shannon Schleck, and a couple of other directors, and immediately saw that there was a great connection to my background, what I had been doing, and put my name in the hat. And 6 years later, I'm still here.
There you go. So, how do you view AURI's role in the value added egg ecosystem? Now that you've got your feet wet and you're under the table on a monthly basis, what's the role?
AURI is such a fantastic organization and enables value added agriculture primarily in Minnesota, right? And that's its role, is for value added agriculture in Minnesota, but it touches so many parts of the globe, right? And so in several of the commodities that enabling value add are those that are regionally focused. So corn is a great example, right? And I continue to be amazed at the people and the enablement of innovations, not only in Minnesota, but around the ecosystem, to really drive value added agriculture forward.
When you look at AURI's scope of work, Jon, what surprises you or impresses you the most?
Well, I would say it's been over the last 6 years. I was actually a bit overwhelmed at the capabilities and how broad they were in the organization. So you could come with a food project or, how to valorize or add value to a byproduct in a meat processing or rendering. And it's just the breadth continues to surprise me. Where I see AURI's sweet spot is in some of these really value add areas for co-products, for renewable natural gas, for example. These type of big areas that AURI is so well positioned to bring several people across, because a lot of this involves connecting, right? And so not only understanding the technology, but then connecting the businesses to enable value to occur. It's not about research and science, it's really activating the science in enabling value creation of jobs and capital investment and revenue growth for companies either established or developing in Minnesota.
And really, if you've never taken the tour, it's done in some pretty small laboratories.
Yes, there are the smaller laboratories, but then also I would say the larger flagship in Wasika with the Bioindustrial Innovation Lab. That's a very impressive laboratory and demonstration facility.
How do you look at your role on that board of directors? What do you think your mission is there?
It's a great question because it's having a technical background and just this curiosity to really want to drive the science forward. It's sometimes a dual role. And so it's helping Shannon and talking through and brainstorming with the staff and the leadership at AURI to really understand how we can, as board members, play a role in helping them. But then, then there's the governance side of the board responsibilities, and that is, the fiducial oversight and ensuring that we're working with the management team and that we understand and agree with where the funds and how the funds are being managed and spent. And then the strategic alignment, and that's really working across the organization with a great group of leaders, up and down that organization who want to do a lot of things. But, we also have to keep the organization focused on where it can add most value and stay within the framework that the Minnesota legislature has set up when they put the organization charter together.
For some listeners, you might be interested to know that the state legislature created AURI in the mid to late 80s, and they still operate under certain statutes. And Jon, when we talk about the board and those statutes that are required of AURI, how's the board organized and who's represented on the board?
It's a really diverse group of people and tapping into the breadth of what Minnesota has to offer. So total, there are 11 board members, and it's comprised of, well, so my seat is an ag business seat. So I come from an agricultural business in Minnesota. So there's two ag business seats. There are two at-large seats. So anybody with any background has an interest can apply. There are three commodity council organizations currently represented by beef, wheat, and soybeans. And then there are two farmer organizations. And so Minnesota Farmers Union and Minnesota Farm Bureau are on the board. And then the final two seats are the legislative seats. So generally, in the past, those are appointed by the House and Senate Ag committees, and generally has been the House and Senate Ag committee chairperson.
And they're charged with just overseeing the operation of AURI and trying to move the organization forward and the hiring of the chief executive officer or the executive director, right?
That is correct. So overseeing the operations and finances of the organization and hiring and managing the executive director.
We're going to get close to wrap up here, but as we do, I want to get your vision a little bit. And let's start with Qore. What do the next 5 years look like to you?
I wish I had that crystal ball, Dan. The last 5 years have been fun and exciting, and I hope the next 5 years are fun and exciting. So I've been able to meet a lot of really energized people across the globe, but within the apparel, textile, footwear, automotive, packaging spaces that are really focused on differentiating some of their existing product portfolios. And so I think, like a lot of different projects that AURI has worked on, there are materials that you can make from agricultural residues that are better for the environment and better for society long term. And so I just hope, we continue to grow that business, and we're working on expanding and making further investment into manufacturing footprint for Qore.
And I'll probably ask you the same question about AURI. You've been on the board now for 6 years. You've got 3 more, I guess, if you want to continue to serve. How about AURI over the next 3 or 4 years? Where do you see its role on the next generation of value-added agricultural products and processes?
I see it continuing to lead in the state of in playing that unique role between basic research and established, let's call it large business, playing that unique role in enabling entrepreneurs and small to medium businesses in enabling those value added agriculture innovations that will continue to drive capital investment in the state, that will continue to add agriculture, continue to add jobs within the egg industry, and hopefully, continue to identify and launch the next QIRA, right? I mean, those are the types of things where I think AURI is especially situated in Minnesota to really drive those types of projects and products.
Jon, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been a great conversation.
Hey, Dan, always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for having me on.
We've been visiting today with Jon Veldhouse, AURI board member and CEO of Qore LLC. I want to thank you for joining us today and for listening to the Ag Innovation News Podcast, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. I want to thank my podcast crew, Lisa Martinez, AURI Communications Manager and the editor of this production. To learn more about this work and the other innovative work that AURI is involved with, you can visit auri.org.